Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig, and we are so excited to have a very important psychologist, a former radio host, TV personality, and author of multiple books. But this is her latest book, and I really want to dive deep into this one. It's called But It's Your Family, Cutting Ties with Toxic Family Members and Loving Yourself in the Aftermath. But before we get into talking about this book, because I have so many questions,
I'm excited.
Dr. Sherrie Campbell, I want to mention and give a shout out to our friends at Balance 3H Plus. It is a doctor-created and supervised program that looks at balancing your hormones, and it's a weight loss program that balances your hormones to help you lose weight for women 40 and above. So definitely check them out. We love them. And now that it's summer,
we all need it.
Think about weight and the ideal weight, right?
Absolutely. At our age, yes. Bikini body.
At any age.
Right?
I just was so drawn in by this topic because, as I mentioned to you before we started, I said, we both are in private practice. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Campbell is in LA, right?
Orange County, LA.
Orange County, in California, has a private practice. I have one on the East Coast in New York, and I was telling her that I don't really have any patients that want to cut ties with their families. Mm-hmm. And you quickly just corrected me and said,
people don't want to cut ties. It's a matter of there's no other choice.
Yes.
And in my circumstance, I didn't want to read another book only written from a research space. I wanted to give a story, not just my own, which I think is very important. You don't want to follow a leader who's never suffered. And the myth is that this is an easy thing to do and that you must be a spiteful, hateful, spoiled child to cut your family off.
Or disloyal. And I loved how you pointed out that when you mentioned that you had to cut ties with your family, that there's a lot of questions surrounding that statement.
Yeah.
But also that there's a tendency to blame the victim.
Then that's secondary abuse, right? It's like you end up now having to defend yourself everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And in another interview, I was asked, what are 10 steps that you can give someone to cut ties with their toxic family? And I was like, I didn't do this out of any confidence. Mm-hmm. I did this, I was either going to stay in the burning building or I was going to jump and try to have a shot at a happy life. And I jumped. And so confidence has come after. And the aftermath of loving yourself is a whole other process. But the cutting of ties, it's like there's no other choice.
So let's just help everyone understand that this book came out of, to some extent, your own personal experience.
Yes.
We have some beautiful childhood photos of you, where we see just that innocent child, but at that time, you were really struggling and suffering. In fact, that's what motivated you to write this book.
Yeah, even when I look at my smile in the photo, I'm not a free child. My friend next to me is much more free than I am. I'm pursing my lips and I'm sort of stiff, and that was really a lot of the way that I lived throughout my life. And it was really challenging.
In your family that helped you determine or define your family members as toxic?
Both parents are bullies. So I would say my mother is very passive-aggressive and covertly toxic, so much harder for me to pick that up. I can't prove a look of disgust on her face, but I could sure feel it. A tone of voice. Come on, honey, someone will marry you.
Oh.
And then I would be like, well, why did you say it like that? And she's like,
awful.
What? My dad was more overtly emotionally violent, physically violent, and both married 4 times. So for me, my life was changing constantly, and I just never felt good. I felt lost. I felt unsteady. I felt sad, lonely. And I was traveling through stepkids and step-parents constantly, and I just didn't know any different. But I was never, ever happy.
When patients come to you, how do you help them decide whether it makes sense to take a break
Yeah, right.
or permanently sever ties with their toxic family members?
We go through a process of, there's low contact, right, that I talk about in my book, which is you can see them at holidays or if you want to go to a Sunday something, but you kind of go and you get out. And if that is still creating a lot of havoc in your life and you're still getting bullied and abused, because toxic people don't change. So I can either give them strategies to cope with that, and then if not, we try cordial contact, which we decrease contact quite a bit. And you may see them once a year, or you might talk to them just very now and again.
I have a question. Given the fact that you needed to sever ties, do you ever recommend to certain patients that maybe they don't need to go that drastic route?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I want it to be the last resort because we are so bound by our family. If you meet anybody new, they're eventually going to say, where are you from? Who's your family? So when you lose your family, you lose everything that identifies you as valuable. I mean, this is your tribe.
Yeah.
And so when you leave that tribe and you feel like you have no value, or you're ashamed to tell people that you don't have a family, it brings up all this value. If you can keep one string to your family that can be positive, I would prefer people do that. But in cases like mine, where even one string was manipulation, then I support them also not to do that.
How long did it take you to adjust once you, and you use very powerful language to describe what happened in your family. You said that you felt emotionally raped.
Yes.
What is emotional rape?
Emotional rape is just a complete lack of respect or regard for how someone feels. No matter our age, we are still that person's child. And so if you're my age at 45 and your mother does something to hurt you, you're not hurting as a 45-year-old doctor, you're hurting as a child, this woman's daughter. And so I feel like when you have such a lack of regard for somebody's emotions, that's really emotionally raping of them, a complete lack of regard.
And it's so challenging because death doesn't always take away our parents' voice in our head. I mean, I still am trying to please my mother. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And some days I get it better than others, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that's not true, but that would be true the rest of my life.
Forever. Unless you can lobotomize the amygdala and hippocampal structures in the brain.
I probably should.
I wish
I'd be
we
better
could.
off. I don't know.
Exactly.
Do you think I'd shop less if I did that?
Maybe. You might. But what I want to feel like is that we are recording our parents every day, and we're taking in them, and we become what we see. And if we're not going along with the program like I was, there was a golden child in my family and I was a scapegoat. For some reason, intuitively, I just couldn't go along with the program. I knew it was wrong. And so...
What were they asking of you that you couldn't give?
Oh gosh, I couldn't give them anything that they wanted because there was such a golden child in front of me.
Wow.
So I couldn't be good enough. And I would do things like, okay, well, maybe if I succeed like him, then they'll love me. But what I've come to learn as I've gone along in my life is like it was okay for him to succeed. But for whatever reason, if I succeeded, it just incensed things worse for me.
Was your mother competitive with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because I even see that, and these are concepts, and you talk about the myths of family in your book. You know, there are things that we don't like to talk about, but they happen.
Yes.
So, for example, a mother can be envious of her child for a whole host of things, and it's not something we like to talk about culturally.
Right, right.
Maybe we talk about extremes, because that seems a little bit more out of the mainstream, and we can feel less vulnerable to a murderous mother, let's say, or a murderous parent, or abusive. But there are certainly messages that run deep. You seem to have escaped that in order to be the success that you are. What was your journey? I mean, we have pictures of you. You're in a successful relationship. You have a wonderful relationship with your daughter.
I do. So I've escaped many patterns. I mean, I will say, and my partner would say that it haunts me every day. Yeah. There's this still part of me that wonders if I'm good enough, or why do they hate me? I mean, it's an everyday thing. Even when we were out here, he asked about my brother, which we don't really talk about, my sibling very much. And the next thing I know, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. I'm like, swallow, trying to hold on to it, because it's just so surreal for me that I'm here. Did I succeed out of wanting to succeed, or am I running from fear? I don't know.
And does it matter?
I don't know.
As long as you're helping other people,
either way,
and using your skills,
that's right.
Doesn't matter how you get to a place if you're doing good.
Yeah, and I feel good about who I am and what I'm doing, and yet I accept that there's this broken piece.
Yeah.
And I'm done trying to fix it. I just accept that this is a part of me, and this pain's going to travel with me. But the gift of the pain is that I'm offering it. Very little of the research that I was reading throughout my life to try to help me ever told the author's own story. So then I never felt like if they were in my position that they would really know how to answer my questions. So what the feedback I get is like, did you write this book about me? I feel like you videoed my life and wrote a story about it. Now that sits inside my sense of self in a really positive way.
So in sharing your story, you're helping other people who
Absolutely.
identify with you, who have toxic family members that enjoy, there are sadistic family members.
There are.
That get off on being mean and devaluing.
Yes.
And it's hard to tell the difference. And you talk about this in your book, which I think is just such an important point. What's the difference between a flawed family member and a toxic family member? Because there is a difference.
There is a difference, and it's going to sound so basic, but it's the ability to be wrong. When we're as parents, we're not always going to be emotionally available to our kids. No matter how much we try, we're going to be imperfect. But if I recognize that I've harmed my daughter and I've shamed her or I've hurt her feelings, I will own that. Listen, I had a bad day. I'm exhausted. I heard that tone come out of my mouth. You don't deserve that, right? So if you can own it, and then your child's important. The shame now goes away, and the memory that they keep is the one that my mom owned that. My mom loves me. If you don't own it to your kids, then they take it as it's them.
Yeah.
They are the problem.
And that can affect them a lifetime in terms of multiple patterns. Well, we have a psych intern, Zach, who is studying psychology, and he prepared this question for you.
I'm excited.
Okay, so when parents are manipulating their children and are only focused on protecting their own self-image and ego, does this influence their children to take on these characteristics when they become parents someday?
Absolutely. It depends on what role you play. So my theory now is that the more toxic the family, the more rigid those roles, right? Golden child, scapegoat. So the child that's more golden child is the one who takes on the majority of those toxic traits. Whatever they did to please the parents worked, they got elevated for it, right? But they never questioned the system. So a scapegoat in that dynamic is more likely to question the system and be curious about, well, are there other thoughts out there? This still doesn't seem right. So you have to be really aware, and the golden child is getting so adored that they're not always aware, and they take on the worst traits of their toxic parents.
And they're also getting a different parent.
They're getting a wholly different parent.
We each get a different parent in the family, based on sex, based on personality, based on envy, a whole host of factors.
That's right.
So that adds to the complexity.
Well, I would see my sibling adored.
Yeah.
And I feel like I would walk up and it would be like, oh, so it was just so different. My light didn't shine quite as bright. And then the more brightly I shined as everything came up, then it threatened the golden child.
And the truth of the matter is, this is true for all of us, part of us defines who we are based on those around us.
100%.
There's just no way around it. I mean, we can't just kind of define ourselves in a vacuum.
No.
In fact, that brings up, there were just so many things that you pointed out. You write that hope is dope, but you didn't mean dope in like it's cool.
No, or a drug, but it's like a drug.
Yes.
Yes. So the way that they abuse is they idealize you, they devalue you, and then they discard you. And then it's called hoovering, like the vacuum, once you've been totally discarded, and this has happened many times in my life where it was so bad that I was starting to make my way out and they'd suck me back in. So to be idealized, that hard swing back to feeling good, just to go down that ladder again.
It's emotional
It made
abuse.
my abuse worse every time. So every time that I got that low, it was even harder to go.
And I think it takes getting older and maybe even being a parent
Agreed.
to identify that pattern, because if you come from an environment that's unhealthy in some way and you want to do better.
And that's another thing I want to make a point of, is it's never too late.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was 42 when I cut ties with my toxic sibling and toxic father. But the mother is this thing for us that's just so much harder to let go of. She's more defining of our identities than anybody else. Took me 4 more years. So I was 45 with her.
Yeah.
So it's never too late.
Does she try to contact you at this point?
She hoovers on holidays with some pretty interesting, cryptic gifts.
How do you teach people who have been raised in a toxic environment, whether they've cut ties or not, to love themselves? It's actually one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah, it's definitely not an event. It's a process, right? So I still work on that every day. I look at what do I have control over, right? So physically, emotionally, mentally, relationally, and financially, I have control. And I chose toxic partners for a long time because that was so familiar to me. It's all I knew. So I cleaned house, it seemed like, once I cut ties. I just cleaned all the toxic people out. It's your bottom falls out when you're in a situation like mine. So I'm paralyzingly alone, but I fill my life up with wonderful people, and I fill my life up with my daughter. But having a purpose, if you want to love yourself, have a purpose. I turned my perpetrators into a purpose. And so that offers me a tremendous amount of love and gratitude. It helps me see the good, because I am a little bit sad every day.
I think that's really important to know, that it's a grieving process. And also, there's a grieving process when you let go and you know that the person that you want this other person to be doesn't exist.
It's amazing what we'll do as kids, and we'll make up a story
it's survival.
About, because if we think our parents are incapable, we feel very scared as kids. So the story we make up is we must be the problem. I think one huge aha moment is once I realized that I wasn't the problem, I was powerless to fix it. And that was huge for me. Because that really increased my sadness. Because I'll work on myself. I'll do that to the end of time. But when I realized there was no amount of work I could do on me to change my circumstances, the grieving began.
Some of the points you highlight in the book, and we're going to have a link up so everybody can get their own book and also find you on your website. And I'm so glad that we are connected now, that you say you must choose freedom from slavery, you must choose to value yourself over your abuser, you must choose health over harm, you must choose a life of healing over hurting, you must change. The good news is you can do all of these things. And I really recommend, especially for people who are going through challenging times, to read this book and to give themselves some tools to get through the dark times and find a way to better times and self-love. We do something called the Quick Five.
Okay, great.
So we're going to do that now.
Love it.
First question is, who inspires you and who do you aspire to be like?
I've got 2. Maya Angelou is so inspiring.
She's so wise.
So wise, and her poem, I Rise, I'm going to have it painted and put somewhere in my home.
Beautiful.
Although that is about actual slavery and being low, the scapegoat is the slave of the family. So I just identify, and of course Oprah, I mean, who would not want to meet Oprah? She's
incredibly talented.
Yes, and so her message, she's always inspired me, and her spirit is so vast and so beautiful. So those are 2 people that I would really love to meet.
2 great choices.
Yeah.
I like those choices. What movie or book character do you most identify with?
But the first movie that comes to mind for me is Shine.
Shine. I haven't even seen that.
Shine has Jeffrey Rush, and it's about a prodigy piano player.
Oh.
But he was sort of the golden child and the scapegoat at the same time in
He had
this
ambitious
movie.
parents.
Yes. His dad wanted to live his dream through him, but when he got his dream, the dad abused him. So there's something about that movie that just...
He got punished for succeeding.
He got punished for succeeding. There we go.
Yeah. If you could choose to remain in age forever, what age would you choose?
I would choose 40.
Okay. I like
40
that.
was like everything.
It's a good decade.
It's just a good decade.
Yeah,
You're like a woman at 40, you know? 40 is beautiful. Like 30 up to 35, everything's new. You're going to school, having kids, getting married, messing that up for me. Doing all this stuff. By 40, I'm like, okay, I've done it all. So now I can just kind of learn more. Not everything is going to be new. So I liked 40.
You kind of reap the rewards for everything you learned and just all the effort that you put in to paving your path.
You're not a little girl anymore. You're not trying anymore. Now you're 40. Yeah, I would do 40.
That's a good age. Okay. What would a perfect day look like? Let me say it first. What would a perfect day look like for you?
Oh gosh, I would love to just have a day off of work actually. Run trails outside for sure, write in my journal, watch a great movie, go to bed early.
Self-care.
Just self-care.
Is good.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the one skill you think everyone should have?
Hard work. I think that hard work trumps talent and genius. I also think in the long term, it brings you happiness. I really truly believe that if we're active, we're happy. When we're inactive, we're not happy. We give our brains too much time to sit in what hurts or doesn't feel good, and that isn't productive. It's hard enough as it is.
It's like a deep, dark black hole.
That's right. But if you're working hard, then I think happiness is that byproduct.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I know that certainly works for me.
Me too.
Okay, so everybody needs to go out, check out this book, but it's Your Family Cutting Ties with Toxic Family Members and Loving Yourself in the Aftermath by Dr. Sherrie Campbell. We'll have a link up to her site so you can learn all about her and where to find her. She's on Instagram. She's got a huge Facebook following. She's in the media, and she has lots of books out there. Thank you so much for joining us and coming out from California.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here.
And we look forward to seeing you on our next Talking Live. Thanks so much.